Hey guys, so in this lecture, what we are going to see is props. Now we've already covered how rendering works and we've tried to use state before. But let's quickly see how props can be passed and how they can be used in detail. So there are three things that we will see. One is how to use props. Two is how to default the props. And three, how to interact with the state so that the props can be passed to the child components. Now, the main difference between state and the props is that the props are immutable. This is why the container component or the parent class should always define the state that can be updated and changed, while the child component should only pass the data from the state using props. Let's see that in an example. So if you recollect from our previous example, this is what we had on the screen. Now let's just try to remove this clock because this ticking all the time is very annoying. So let me just go and comment this out, and the way we comment it is using the block comments. So I comment it out and this goes off. Now let's try to pass in the properties. Go to the index.js, type in header. You can call anything to this props because it's as good as making your own property. But make sure to make a note of it. So props from the header. Now the next you can do is content is equals to props from the content. You save it, nothing should happen on the screen, although it will refresh because we are not using it here. So what you're trying to do is when you're rendering into the DOM, you're rendering this app component. And when you're rendering this app component, you're passing the properties. So how you can access the properties is first you need to be in the context of the class, which means the app class that you have. And the way you can be is this dot, and then just like we had the state, we can also use props. So you can do a props dot and the name of the prop. Let's say header. And let's save it. And we should start seeing the result onto the screen. So props from the header got displayed. Easy, right? Similarly, you can copy paste this and make this the content and save it. So this should also display the content. Of course, they are not in the different lines because we do not have a line break out there. Now that was displaying the properties which come from the parent. What if these properties are not existing? Let's say if I'm not passing anything from the header and I need to default to something. So how do I achieve that? Well, it's very simple in case of React. The way you do it is you can just go outside the class and do an app.default props, and of course you do not have to give a static, and when you give the props you can give the property as header and the value as default props for the header, comma content as default props for the content. Let's save it, and now when the screen refreshes you can see the new content coming in, and voila, there it is. So you saw default props from the header and for the content. So that's how you can use the default props to display something, or probably use a property's default value when you do not have the property passed. Let's see another example where we have a state talking to the props. And how do we do that? Well, the first, we have already done half of it, which is when we created the this.state for the app class with the header text and content text, we already had a state variable created. Now let's make use of this state variable and pass it to the header and the content tag. So let's just delete this. We do not need this anymore. And let's try to use this state and pass it as a property to the header tag. So the way we do is header is equals to this dot state dot header text, and here we do content is equals to this dot state dot content text. Easy, right? So now you're passing the state of the particular parent class to the child class as a property, but the property is not yet displayed on the screen because you haven't displayed it. So the very easy way to do it is you can just go to the content class, and probably here you already have a p tag which will display something. You can just do a this dot props dot content because that's what you're passing. And as the page refreshes, you can see that in this class we will go over the component. Of course, you see it 2 times because one is from the p tag out here. So that's how you can use a state and a prop. That was all about properties, but with passing properties, there's always a risk of properties not being valid. And yes, in the next class, we will cover how to validate these properties. So I'll see you in the next class.